Where have you been partying? As soon as I got home, I spoke up before he could, mimicking his tone. Wendy Faraday, are you starting to run wild again? Do you know what score you got on your last mock exam? Do you know how many times you've skipped class? If you weren't a Faraday, you'd have been expelled by now. At this moment, the atmosphere in the living room was terribly tense. Miss, please stop, the housekeeper whispered. I was quite drunk. Kicking off my high heels, I pouted. He always says the same few lines. I could recite them by heart. I stood barefoot on the floor, silently looking at Nicholas. The incandescent light in the living room cast a shadow on his face beneath his glasses. He looked so serious. I suddenly felt a bit regretful about my behavior and turned to head upstairs. He stood up and chased after me, frightening me into running to my room. However, I was a second too slow. He forcefully pushed open my door with one hand. Wendy Faraday, my patience has limits. If your teacher calls me again about you skipping class, Nicholas said, veins bulging on the back of his hand, his voice low and stern. I promise, I will break your legs. I frowned, looking up at Nicholas, and sniffled twice. Uncle, I'm sorry. Nicholas looked at me, seeming like he wanted to laugh, probably out of anger. Fake crying? Not a single tear? I gritted my teeth and suddenly let go of the door I was holding, causing him to almost stumble. Nicholas couldn't help but scold me under his breath. I buried my head in my pillow, unable to hold back a laugh, feeling strangely mischievous. But I loved seeing Nicholas get worked up over me. It must be hereditary. My mom was the same way. She loved seeing men get worked up over her, until she finally met a psychopath and lost her life. When she left, my dad became even more unrestrained in his debauchery, eventually dying in the arms of another woman. I'm truly impressed by this couple. They never had time to take care of me, starved me, abandoned me on the roadside while they were busy having fun, and ended up making me an orphan, forcing me to seek out their relatives. Just to survive. At 14, I ran out onto the street and was nearly hit by Nicholas's car. At that time, Nicholas was 24. He probably never imagined that his life would become so turbulent because of me in the future. Nicholas Faraday, raised by my grandfather, took on the Faraday surname. Despite our 10-year age gap and lack of blood relation, he adopted a hands-off approach to my upbringing. During this period of freedom, I skipped classes, caused mischief, and became notorious for spending money like water. I earned a reputation as a young heiress, and my personality grew increasingly unruly. To rectify the situation, Nicholas began chasing me down everywhere to prevent me from skipping school. Soon, rumors spread throughout the school that I had an incredibly handsome boyfriend. The next day was Saturday. I had planned to sleep in, but early in the morning, the housekeeper came to wake me up for vocabulary practice. Irritated, I started rolling around in bed. Wendy Faraday, come out, Nicholas called. I threw a pillow at the door and continued lying face down, grumbling, "You're so annoying." After that, silence fell outside the door. The housekeeper sighed resignedly, "Miss, once the young master gets married, he won't be bothering you for much longer." The room fell quiet. I suddenly opened my eyes, looking at the housekeeper in disbelief. "Am married?" "Yes," the housekeeper replied. "The young master is nearly 28 now, and the old master is getting anxious. Does uncle want to get married? Why wouldn't he? There's a time for everything in life. Miss, you have exams coming up soon, you really must focus on your studies now." The housekeeper spoke earnestly, adding softly, "The young master has already put a stop to all your entertainment industry activities." My mind was in a whirl, unable to process anything else except for one key point. Marriage. Wasn't there someone he still held in his heart? How could he be willing to marry now? With these questions swirling in my head, I spent 2 hours studying vocabulary and took a test on 20 words, getting half of them wrong. "What are you thinking about?" Nicholas looked at my test paper, seemingly on the verge of a stress-induced headache. "Uncle, are you planning to get married?" I asked. "Did the old master ask you to inquire?" "No, I'm just curious and wanted to ask." I rested my chin on my hands, extremely anxious about Nicholas's response. However, he glanced at me and said coolly, "How do you spell curious in English?" Before I could reach for the dictionary, Nicholas moved past the topic, sat down beside me, and said quietly, "Repeat after me, let's start with pronunciation." I frowned, starting to find him annoying again. My latest drama series is already a hit, and I can earn money on my own now. Isn't studying just a waste of time? It's getting in the way of me making money. I argued vehemently, but Nicholas's expression darkened. "Study your vocabulary," he demanded. TCH. "When you can't win an argument, you just get angry," I muttered under my breath. In response, Nicholas reached out and pinched my cheek, quite hard too. I winced in pain. "What are you doing?" "Focus! For heaven's sake, I'm begging you." I couldn't believe Nicholas actually stayed home all day to supervise my studies. I stretched lazily, glancing at Nicholas who had fallen asleep beside me. I couldn't help but stare. Unconsciously, I leaned closer, my gaze falling on his pale lips. My heart began to race. His lips looked so soft. "Uncle," I whispered softly. Nicholas, drowsy with sleep, didn't respond. Emboldened, I moved even closer, but suddenly there was a knock at the door. "Miss Wendy, what are you doing?" The housekeeper's gaze was inquisitive. I panicked inexplicably, lost my balance, and fell right into Nicholas's lap. His familiar cologne, reminiscent of lingering mint, made my heart skip a beat. Nicholas, startled awake, mumbled sleepily and somewhat exasperatedly, "Darling, stop fussing. Let me rest for a bit." You sleep, I hurriedly got up, my face burning. I couldn't meet the housekeeper's eyes as I muttered, "I've finished my revision. I'm going out to play." I rushed past the housekeeper, only to realize halfway down the stairs that I'd left my mobile upstairs. I hurried back up. "Sir, Miss Wendy is nearly of age. You can't keep worrying about her forever. Perhaps it's time to hire a tutor? We've had dozens before. Were any of them useful?" Nicholas rubbed his temples, completely missing the housekeeper's implication. The housekeeper spoke again, more delicately this time. "Sir, aren't you worried Miss Wendy might develop feelings for you?" "Her?" Nicholas scoffed. "That girl probably wishes I'd drop dead." Seeing Nicholas's attitude, the housekeeper changed tack. "Miss Wendy has mock exams next week. It might be a good time for you to meet the young lady Mr. Standish has arranged." Annoyed, I kicked the door lightly. Noticing Nicholas look over, I felt a pang of guilt and ran off. The thought of Nicholas going on a date while I was stuck in exams made me hate them even more. The night before the exam, Nicholas was practically forcing me to revise, yet he was looking at his phone, even raising an eyebrow at it. He didn't used to be like this. He would always watch me, keeping me company while I studied. "Uncle, what are you looking at?" Nicholas paused for 2 seconds, then chuckled. "Is the young lady trying to manage me now?" I belatedly realized the gravity in my tone, noticing Nicholas's phone screen light up again. I tossed the book onto the table, making up an excuse. I have a stomachache." Nicholas looked exasperated. "Try a fresher excuse." As soon as I felt Nicholas's attention wasn't on me, I felt uneasy. "Are you in a bad mood today?" Nicholas leaned in closer, bending down to look at me, his tone gentle, as if coaxing a child. "Who's upset our little princess? Tell Uncle about it?" I glanced at him sideways, mumbling, "I'm trying to revise, you're on your phone, not keeping me company." "You're angry about that?" Nicholas curved his lips, sighing with a smile. "Uncle was just dealing with work matters, not playing." "How about Uncle turns off his phone and keeps you company, all right?" "Work matters?" So he wasn't chatting with a blind date. I was satisfied, but I didn't want to show it outwardly. However, Nicholas's steps towards arranged meetings wouldn't stop because of me. The next morning, when I got up for breakfast, he was already gone. According to the housekeeper, he had to finish work quickly to make time for a blind date. I kept thinking about this at school. If someone had to marry Nicholas, why couldn't it be me? When I left school, there was no one outside the gate. I took a taxi straight to the restaurant where Grandpa often meets guests. I guessed Nicholas would be there. As soon as the restaurant door opened, a woman with a slender figure was walking towards me, but someone stopped her, persuading her to go back. This woman must be Nicholas's blind date. I recognized her as Cecily Harrington, the daughter of a jeweler and merchant. Perhaps not impressed with Nicholas, Cecily seemed to have some complaints about going on the blind date. I followed along. It was also the first time I heard some gossip about Nicholas. Not only was he adopted by the Faraday family, but he had also been in juvenile detention. Apparently, when he was young, he was a delinquent. Now, Nicholas wore glasses and a white shirt, showing no trace of a delinquent. I could only see 2 words in him, restrained and elegant. Is that Nicholas Faraday? Entering the foyer, Cecily stopped, her tone becoming restrained. She even tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, looking at the person beside her. Is my makeup all right? That person looked a bit confused, nodding repeatedly. Cecily cleared her throat, picked up her bag, and walked over in her high heels, showing none of her previous arrogance. I frowned, couldn't help but peek out. Nicholas was sitting by the window, the light shining on his face, as if tracing his features again, sprinkling delicate tenderness in his eyes. This Cecily was clearly attracted by his appearance. I observed the entire blind date. Cecily's eyes hardly left Nicholas, angering me to the point of nearly grinding my teeth. Finally, when she left, I felt a bit better. Wendy Faraday. Nicholas's voice came. I was startled, preparing to slip away, but he had already blocked the exit. Uncle, what a coincidence. I grinned, putting on an obedient look. Why are you here at this time? Nicholas crossed his arms, looking at me calmly, very serious. You'd better give me a reasonable explanation. Before Nicholas could lose his temper, I tried to change the subject. Uncle, are you hungry? I'm hungry. Nicholas, I'm almost full from anger. Before I could speak again, Nicholas turned and left, throwing back a displeased sentence. If you fail even one subject in this mock exam, you're grounded for a month. I tried to keep up with his pace, but Nicholas was walking so fast. I got a bit annoyed and directly jumped onto his back. How about 2 weeks? Nicholas supported my legs with his hands, carrying me on his back, and said in a deep voice, "No bargaining." I was about to hum in protest when I saw Cecily returning. Mr. Faraday. Cecily was smiling at first, but when she saw me on Nicholas's back, her face instantly cooled. Won't you introduce us? Seeing her confrontational manner, I secretly rolled my eyes, muttering in my heart. Didn't you look down on him for being adopted? My niece, Nicholas answered flatly. Cecily paused, as if remembering who I was, glanced at me and smiled. It's Wendy, almost 18, and still needs uncle to carry her? Even at 80, I'd still want him to carry me, I replied casually, leaning on Nicholas's back. Cecily snorted in anger. Nicholas slightly tightened his grip on my legs, signaling me not to speak, then turned to Cecily. I'm sorry, I've spoiled her. Cecily smiled coldly, indeed. Whose niece is so clingy to her uncle? Suddenly hit by the truth. But Nicholas said, my apologies for the embarrassment, Miss Harrington. It's getting late, I should take the child home now. We'll meet again next time. Nicholas carried me on his back, walking swiftly. I pouted and glanced back at Cecily Harrington. Uncle, are you afraid of this Cecily Harrington? I asked. Yes, Nicholas replied softly. I'm terrified. Afraid she'll say you're skipping classes, afraid she'll say I haven't taught you well. You're a grown-up now. If you get married someday and still act like this, people will curse me behind my back. I leaned on his back, poking his spine with my hand. Then why don't you marry me? I hummed. What? Nicholas exclaimed in surprise. I tugged at his collar and repeated, I said, you should marry me. The air suddenly fell silent, which was the most frightening thing. Unable to see Nicholas's expression, I felt a bit nervous. Suddenly, Nicholas laughed and said helplessly, Wendy Faraday, I've raised you for 4 years. Even if I don't have any merit, I've put in the effort. Don't repay kindness with enmity. I'm not. I straightened up, patted Nicholas's shoulder, and said seriously, Nicholas, I like you. The kind of like between a man and a woman. Nicholas stopped walking and said in a low voice, "This joke isn't funny." I frowned and retorted, "I'm not joking. Have I spoiled you rotten?" Nicholas's tone suddenly turned cold, and his volume increased. He crouched down and said sternly, "Get off. Walk by yourself." I was stunned for a moment, completely unprepared for Nicholas's attitude. "Fine, I'll walk by myself." My nose stung, and I unconsciously spoke with a crying voice, running away quickly. "Wendy Faraday!" I ignored Nicholas's calls and ran towards the distance. "Blimey, you actually fancy your uncle." Bronte was shocked, lowering her voice and looking at me in astonishment. "Bloody hell, I can't believe you confessed to your own uncle. We're not blood related." I just like him," I sobbed, stammering as I spoke. Bronte glanced at me, resting her chin on her hands. "Why don't you think about your grades instead? The teachers are working overtime today, so the results will be out tonight at the earliest." My crying stopped abruptly. "Will there be a parents' evening?" Bronte, yes. I sniffled a couple of times and cried even harder. To avoid Nicholas, I decided not to go home and stayed at Bronte's house instead. However, by nightfall, Nicholas hadn't called me even once. I felt my eyes swelling from crying, curled up in the blanket, and was about to drift off to sleep. "Zeb, mate, sorry for the trouble," I heard a familiar voice. "We're classmates, no need to be so formal," Zeb replied. In my drowsy state, I vaguely felt someone embracing me. The crisp fragrance belonged uniquely to Nicholas. "I heard you're going on blind dates?" Zeb asked. "Yes," Nicholas replied. "Do you remember Eliza Standish?" There was a long silence. I frowned, whimpering softly, and unconsciously hugged the warmth closer, hazily opening my eyes. "I do," Nicholas said softly, holding me a bit tighter. "She's been looking for you recently, contacting quite a few classmates, and then found me," Zeb said, hands in his pockets, hesitantly asking. "I wonder, if she had known you were adopted by the Faraday family back then, would she still have broken up with you? Could you two get back together?" At this moment, I was wide awake, ears perked up, waiting for Nicholas's response. Nicholas remained silent for a long time. Zeb couldn't help but say, "Sorry, I shouldn't have asked." "It's all in the past now, water under the bridge," Nicholas said, hugging me tighter and smiling. "It's getting late. I'd better take Wendy home." I thought Nicholas was going to take me home, but to my surprise, he drove to the seaside. Nicholas sat alone on the steps by the sea, casually lighting a cigarette. "Wendy Faraday," he called. I felt a bit scared under his gaze. Nicholas frowned in displeasure. "You're going through puberty. Read fewer romance novels." "I'm your uncle, don't say such nonsensical things to me, understand?" "You're not my real uncle," I retorted loudly. Nicholas held the cigarette between his fingers, exhaling a wisp of smoke, and said in a deep voice, "I think you've lost your mind." "Nicholas, you're being unreasonable. Why is it that when I like you, I've lost my mind, but when Eliza likes you, it's fine?" I said, my eyes stinging. Nicholas's face instantly turned cold. My eyes welled up with tears as I said softly, "I have the right to like you." Nicholas looked at me and said in a low voice, "If a primary school student told you they liked you, and I mean liked you romantically, what would you think?" I was a bit confused. "Primary school students don't understand." Nicholas glanced at me. "In my eyes, you're no different from a primary school student. Do you understand?" The next second, Nicholas extinguished his cigarette and turned towards the car. "Let's go home." I stood there, at a loss for what to do. On Monday, I sat silently in my room, expecting Nicholas to call me for school, but to my surprise, it was his assistant who came. "Where's Uncle?" I asked. "Mr. Faraday had some business to attend to and left early," the assistant replied. I felt a bit disappointed but didn't dwell on it. However, when the assistant came again in the evening, I was on the verge of tears. For some reason, I felt Nicholas was avoiding me. To test this, I broke my usual habit and, instead of waiting for Nicholas to ask for my report card, I took the initiative to bring it to his study. But the room was empty. I started to get anxious and called out to the housekeeper, "When is he coming back?" "Miss Wendy," the housekeeper looked at me and said softly, "Mr. Faraday is away on business for a while and won't be back soon. If you need anything, please ask the assistant." I took out my phone and checked Nicholas's social media account, looking at his weekly report posted today. "You say he's away on business, but where exactly?" The housekeeper hesitated. "His IP address shows he's still here," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "What kind of business trip is this?" The housekeeper pressed her lips together, smiling awkwardly. Time passed, and Nicholas still didn't appear. He even sent his assistant to my parents' evening at school. "Miss Wendy," the assistant said, wiping sweat as we left the teacher's office, "you should try to learn a bit more. The exams are coming up soon." I raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Wasn't it your choice to come to the parents' evening?" "It's my duty to take care of Miss Wendy's affairs," he replied. Standing in the schoolyard, I gazed at the colorful sky in the distance. "When is Uncle coming back? Surely he won't miss my birthday this year?" The assistant remained silent. With Nicholas absent, even skipping classes lost its appeal. I just wanted to spend some time alone on the basketball court, but it was crowded and noisy. "Look at the new transfer student. Isn't he handsome?" someone said. "Yes, yes, yes," I replied to Bronte without even looking up, staring glumly at the ground until a basketball rolled to my feet. Crispin Harrington. I knew that name all too well. He was the one who led the bullying against me, saying I had a life but no one to raise me. I taught him a lesson he wouldn't forget: one punch, two teeth. "Hey," Crispin said, wearing his basketball jersey and jerking his chin at me, "Yes, you. Kick the ball over." I stared at him, raising an eyebrow. "I'm talking to you." Crispin strode over, then froze when he saw my face clearly. "You again?" "Yeah, it's me." "What about it?" I rolled my eyes and raised an eyebrow. "How are those front teeth doing?" Crispin's mouth twitched as he put his hands on his hips and looked at me sternly. "You've got some nerve. Because of you, I was nearly beaten to death by your uncle." Nicholas had hit someone? I knew nothing about this, only that Crispin had transferred schools afterwards. What happened in secondary school was my fault. "I apologize," Crispin said. "No need." I glanced at him and walked away with Bronte. Bronte asked, "Do you two know each other well?" "Old enemies," I replied. Perhaps Crispin really wanted to apologize. He found out which class I was in and started sending snacks nonstop, even waiting for me after school to walk together. Crispin followed behind me, quite helplessly. "Can't you talk to me a bit more? What do you want to hear?" I opened my phone, saw no messages from Nicholas, and felt even worse. £100 per word. Crispin looked at me and smiled, taking out his phone. "Add me as a friend, and I'll transfer you 10,000. I rolled my eyes, not bothering to say more, but then Crispin said with a smile, "Come on, add me. Who knows, we might become family soon." Crispin continued, "Cecily Harrington, my aunt." I gasped, wanting to leave. Crispin added, "Your uncle has been with my aunt these past few days. Didn't you know? They're staying at the hotel my family owns." At that moment, I felt as if I'd been struck by lightning. Perhaps out of fear, I just waited, hoping Nicholas would appear on my birthday. However, on my 18th birthday, Grandpa Barnaby hosted a grand party, inviting guests from all corners, but Nicholas was nowhere to be seen. Wendy Faraday, Crispin Harrington, dressed in a dapper suit, approached me and bowed slightly. "Happy coming of age. May I have this dance?" I bit into a strawberry, glancing at Crispin. "I don't dance. My parents asked me to invite you." Crispin furrowed his brow and whispered, "Come on, Your Highness, do us the honor." I looked to Bronte beside me, only to find her beaming with delight. Resigned, I placed my hand in his. "Do you know how to dance?" Crispin asked in a low voice. Distracted, I glanced at him. "Do I look like someone who knows how to dance?" As the music played, I had nearly trampled Crispin's feet. "Easy there, Your Highness," he winced. "Just bear with it," I replied. Seeing Crispin's discomfort, I couldn't help but smirk. As my gaze swept across the room, my smile froze. Nicholas stood not far away, holding a glass of wine, seemingly appraising Crispin and me. Our eyes met. Nicholas paused, set down his glass, and walked towards a shadowy corner. "Wendy, we're quite well matched." Crispin tightened his grip on my hand and said softly, "Shall we give it a go when we start university?" Watching Nicholas's retreating figure, I barely heard Crispin's words. I pulled my hand free and dashed after Nicholas. "Where are you going?" Crispin called after me. "Uncle!" I shouted. I ran into the garden path, irritably kicking off my high heels to move faster. After searching fruitlessly, I found myself alone in the sitting room, eyeing a row of bottles on the table. I grabbed one and started drinking. I drank too quickly. My chest burned, and my head spun. I curled up on the sofa, taking a while to feel better. "What nonsense is this? Who allowed you to drink so much?" A familiar scolding voice rang out. I opened my bleary eyes to see Nicholas, tears welling up. "Weren't you getting married?" "Who said that?" Nicholas took the bottle from my arms and tossed it aside, looking as if he was about to scold me. Without hesitation, I kissed him. The next moment, the door burst open. Crispin stood there, frozen in shock, followed by a voice. "Is Wendy here?" "Grandpa, wait." "Outrageous!" Grandpa Barnaby's furious shout echoed through the room. My mind went blank. Used to Grandpa's usually mild manner, I was too frightened to speak. "Father," Nicholas shielded me in his arms. Grandpa gripped his cane tightly, roaring, "Don't call me father. I have no son like you." "Grandpa." I came to my senses, wanting to plead for Nicholas. But before I could speak, Grandpa shot me a look of fury that chilled me to the bone. I knew then. Nicholas and I were in deep trouble. I thought we'd just get a scolding. I never imagined that once the guests left, Grandpa would slap Nicholas across the face. The sharp sound rang out. "Grandpa!" I hurriedly stood in front of Nicholas, shouting angrily, "What are you doing? How could you hit him?" "Take her upstairs." Nicholas pushed me aside, speaking to a nearby housekeeper. It was just a kiss. I was panicking but still couldn't understand why Grandpa was so furious. "He's not my real uncle. Why can't I kiss him?" "You insolent child. Don't think I won't punish you too," Grandpa glared. I tried to approach Grandpa, but Nicholas lifted me up and carried me straight upstairs. He opened a door, put me inside, and locked it. "Uncle!" I cried out. "Stay here. Don't come out." Nicholas frowned, his eyes sharp, as he closed and locked the door. About 3 hours later, my phone lit up with a photo from Bronte. It showed Nicholas kneeling alone in the courtyard. The situation was far worse than I had imagined. The next morning, the news reported that Nicholas, one of the key figures in the Faraday group, had been demoted. All my belongings were moved to the main house, not a single item left behind. "I don't want to live here," I protested, trying to stop the people moving my things. "Miss Faraday." The housekeeper looked at me sternly. "If you want Mr. Faraday to be all right, stop making a fuss." I looked at her, confused. The housekeeper avoided my gaze, turning to the movers and gesturing for them to continue. At that moment, I had a terrible premonition. I hurried upstairs. In Grandpa's study, I navigated through rows of bookshelves to see Nicholas kneeling straight-backed before the desk. "Actually, you could use this opportunity to dismiss me," Nicholas said. Nicholas, Grandpa, holding his reading glasses, frowned at Nicholas's words. "Do you understand what you're saying?" "Whatever is between Wendy and me," Nicholas looked at Grandpa unflinchingly, his voice calm. "From the moment you, an outsider, raised her, I knew you would eventually accuse me of incest." Grandpa's eyes lit up, but his brow furrowed immediately after. "I don't want to be a thorn in your side, so I'm voluntarily resigning." "Nicholas, you're a smart man. Don't let your intelligence be your downfall." Grandpa's tone deepened, full of warning. Once you resign, everything you have now will no longer be yours. Nicholas remained silent. I clutched the hem of my shirt, wanting to speak but remembering the housekeeper's words. Not daring to act rashly, I silently retreated from the study. The old man arranged for him to meet Miss Harrington. I thought he was trying to elevate his status. He's nothing more than a dog to the Faraday family. In the living room, the laughter of relatives continued. I stood there stunned, never imagining such words could come from people who usually seemed so kind and gentle. I picked up a nearby vase, intending to splash the water at them, but a hand stopped me. "Uncle." I looked up at Nicholas, voicing my displeasure. "They're saying bad things about you." "It's just a few words, don't take it to heart," Nicholas said calmly, looking down at me as he put the vase back. "It's getting late. I'll drive you to school." Nicholas led me through the living room. The relatives suddenly fell silent, as if struck dumb, looking at each other in bewilderment. In the car, I lowered my eyes, knowing I had caused trouble for Nicholas. Feeling guilty, I said, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have kissed you forcefully. I shouldn't have acted so foolishly and caused your grandfather to hit you." "No need to apologize," Nicholas said in a neutral tone. I was confused and looked at him questioningly. Nicholas gazed at me softly, lowering his eyes before raising them again. I was willing. I was stunned for 2 seconds before a surge of joy rushed through me. Excited, I threw myself into Nicholas's arms. "Uncle!" There, Nicholas patted my head, allowing me to sit beside him as he took out a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it. "Happy birthday." "Thank you." I stared at the necklace inside, unconsciously looking towards Nicholas. The gloom from last night finally began to lift. I moved closer to him but didn't dare to kiss him again. Nicholas's eyes were clear as he took the initiative to give me a quick peck. It was just a fleeting touch. My ears turned red, and I was so nervous I could only hear my own heartbeat. I frowned. I didn't even have time to react. Nicholas turned his face slightly, his expression restrained as he said softly, "We can't go too far." "Just one more." I tugged at his collar, unwilling to give up. Nicholas had no choice but to raise his hand to hold my head, becoming serious again. "Don't be naughty." But I saw that his face had turned red. Emboldened, I lunged at him again, but I didn't expect his breathing to suddenly become heavy as he held me close and began to kiss me. By the time I got out of the car, my legs were a bit wobbly. When Bronte found out later, her eyes widened in complete shock. I pursed my lips, feeling a bit embarrassed, but still happily told her the whole story. "Why do I feel like something's not quite right?" Bronte scratched her head, muttering to herself. Perhaps because I was in such a good mood, I didn't think too deeply about it. But I didn't expect Crispin to corner me during the break. "Wendy, I like you," he said. I was stunned, staring at him. "Don't you have Stockholm Syndrome? Have you forgotten how you lost your tooth?" Before he could say more, the bell rang for class. In the evening after school, I deliberately tried to leave quickly, but Crispin still caught up with me. "After the exams are over, can you give me an answer?" "I'll give you one now." "It's impossible," I said with a frown, turning to see Nicholas waiting for me at the gate. My face lit up instantly. "Nicholas!" I called out. Now, I could finally call him by his name openly. Nicholas took my backpack and tossed it into the car, glancing at Crispin Harrington in the distance. "That kid will grow up to be a decent chap, but his mom's a bit of a handful. Quite picky, she is. Though she does fancy rubies." "Why are you telling me this?" I blinked, puzzled. "What his mom likes is none of my business." I smiled and said, "I only want to know what you like." "But even if you don't tell me, I already know. You don't like spicy food, you love beef, your favorite fruit is oranges, and your favorite color is sky blue. You prefer solid ties over striped ones, and you absolutely adore milkshakes, yet you insist on drinking Americanos every day to stay alert." I rattled on enthusiastically. Nicholas looked at me, his expression subtly changing. For some reason, I sensed a hint of reluctance in his eyes. "See, I know so much about you. Do you know what I like?" I asked with a cheeky grin. I know you don't like sticky toffee pudding or apples. Nicholas said softly. I couldn't help but grumble. Why don't you tell me what I do like? Nicholas sighed and smiled. You like me. I was taken aback for a moment, then pouted sheepishly. I was going to wait until you finished answering before saying that. Everything you mentioned was just general likes, but my absolute favorite is reserved for you. Perhaps I was too straightforward. Nicholas's ears turned red, and his usually pale face showed a hint of embarrassment. How do you blush so easily? It's not very becoming of an older gentleman. Nicholas chuckled, raising an eyebrow. Am I old? No, not at all, I quickly responded. All right, I won't argue with you about it, Nicholas said, seemingly a bit miffed. He furrowed his brow and added, if I were to argue, you wouldn't be able to handle it. Pfft, I'm not afraid, I retorted. Nicholas just smiled without saying a word. Lately, Nicholas had been unusually approachable, though he never initiated anything. He simply allowed me to hug and kiss him, occasionally resisting when my kisses became too intense. I've been staying here for so long now. I want to go back with you, I said. Nicholas looked at me, hesitating to speak. I threw myself into his arms, hugging his neck, and said glumly, I want to move back in. I held on to him, reluctant to let go. Nicholas rested his chin on my shoulder and remained silent for a long while before saying, after your exams are over, I'll come and get you. Really? I exclaimed happily. Nicholas gazed at me intently and said calmly, on the condition that you get into a good university. In the blink of an eye, the new year had arrived. The winter snow had yet to melt, blanketing the back garden in white. I leaned into Nicholas's embrace. If I get into university, can we be together forever? Nicholas's thin lips moved slightly, as if coaxing a child, and he smiled. Of course. Great. I'll definitely get in. I exclaimed, hugging Nicholas tightly, as if to reassure myself. The sky seemed to start snowing again, flakes falling on our heads. Nicholas gazed at me silently, gently squeezing my hand. Catching him off guard, I kissed him quickly, like a child stealing sweets, then ran off giggling. Snowflakes danced in the air as joy filled my heart. My exam scores improved with each test. I became addicted to the thrill of high marks, immersing myself in that feeling right up until exam day. As usual, Nicholas drove me to school. He had already bought my favorite breakfast for the car ride. Nicholas picked up a red hair tie, his slender fingers fidgeting with it as he asked softly, Do you want to wear it or keep it in your bag? Wear it, of course. Help me put it on. I turned around happily, shaking my ponytail at him. I took out my little mirror, wanting to see if Nicholas would tie a bow. But as I caught a glimpse of his face in the reflection, I saw a look of sadness. Have a little faith in me. I'll do well, I promise. I said confidently. Nicholas paused, then smiled. I await the good news. From the start of exams to the end, Nicholas drove me each time. Every day, I could spot him instantly in the crowd, running to him for a big hug. But on the last day of exams, I waited for ages and didn't see him anywhere. Miss. Over here. The housekeeper waved, holding a bouquet of roses. These are from Mr. Faraday. I inhaled the floral scent, my unease fading. Where is he? The housekeeper hesitated, then said quietly, Sir left on a flight an hour ago. What did you say? I stood there in shock, trying to suppress my anxiety as I asked with a forced smile, He's on a business trip? The housekeeper looked at me with an uncomfortable expression. My nose stung as memories of the past suddenly flooded my mind. Him encouraging me to apply for university, giving me the red hair tie, was it all just to leave me? Liar! He's such a liar! I cried out. It was as if I'd woken from a beautiful dream. Everyone was celebrating my exam results, but I felt like I was falling into an abyss. Nicholas's IP address was already showing as overseas. Soon after, he deactivated all his social media accounts. For 3 whole days, I didn't eat or drink. I thought Nicholas would come back, but instead I received share transfer documents. He had transferred all his shares to me. He left nothing for himself, cutting ties cleanly with both the Faraday family and me. Wendy, grandfather said with concern in his eyes, you can't go on without eating like this. I curled up in bed, looking at grandfather as I sobbed, please make him come back. I'm begging you. Wendy, grandfather frowned disapprovingly, you're an adult now. You need to understand he's not your real uncle. Staying with the Faraday family would eventually lead to problems. I'm doing this for your own good. I pleaded tearfully, grandfather, I promise I'll be good from now on. Please just let him come back. But grandfather said sternly, if you say that again, I'll make sure he never recovers his position. I looked at grandfather with tears in my eyes, my heart breaking. I moved back into Nicholas's house, into his room. But from then on, it was just me and the housekeeper there. Looking around the familiar room, I felt like a lifetime had passed. Later, my university acceptance letter arrived. I had become Nicholas's fellow alumna. By then, I thought I had no more tears left to cry. But on the day I arrived at the university, I stared at the alumni wall and broke down sobbing. 2 years later. Life flowed as calmly as a river, with occasional gatherings with Bronte Quillen providing a pleasant diversion. Great news! Bronte exclaimed, rushing over with her handbag. Nicholas Faraday's ex-girlfriend came to our house looking for my brother. She's been pestering him to see Nicholas, and my sister-in-law is getting quite cross. My brother had no choice but to give her an address. Do you want to go and see? The news caught me off guard. I paused for a moment before handing Bronte the menu, saying softly, let's eat. You're not going to find him? Why should I look for him if he doesn't come to find me? It had been quite some time since I learned that Eliza Standish was searching for Nicholas, yet she still hadn't managed to see him. Clearly, Nicholas was rather skilled at avoiding people. Back home, I flopped onto my bed, intending to take a short nap, when I heard the sound of running water from the bathroom. Had I forgotten to turn off the shower? Pushing open the bathroom door, I was enveloped in a cloud of steam. It seemed as though someone was hidden within, water cascading over taut abdominal muscles, veins barely visible beneath pale skin. Who's there? I cried out, startled, stumbling backwards. Don't be afraid, it's me, came a familiar voice. My heart skipped a beat. I immediately let go of the clothes rack I had grabbed for support, staring at the face that was gradually becoming clearer. Anger welled up inside me. How dare you? I exclaimed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to frighten you, Nicholas said, lowering his gaze and bending down. Water droplets slid down his jawline. The house was empty. I thought you were still at university. I can walk by myself. I frowned, my gaze inadvertently trailing down the path of his visible veins. Immediately, I felt my face flush. I tried to push him away, but my hand met his damp abdomen. I want to hold you, Nicholas said softly. I instantly refused, no. I don't want you to. Ignoring my protests, Nicholas picked me up, carried me out of the bathroom, and set me down on the sofa. I bit my lip, not daring to look at him, feeling the heat rising in my cheeks. How have you been these past 2 years? Nicholas asked, crouching beside the sofa, his intense gaze and warm breath washing over me. After 2 years apart, I couldn't understand how he had the audacity to ask such a question. My anger flared, and I glared at him. Just fine. If you'd stayed away for another 2 years, I might even have had a child by now. Is that so? Nicholas paused, his dark eyes reflecting my face. You're in a relationship? I hesitated, then replied coldly, of course. Did you expect me to wait for you? Nicholas suddenly leaned in, his fingers tracing the pendant on my neck. Uncomfortable, I yanked off the necklace and thrust it at him, saying angrily, you gave this to me. Now I'm returning it to its rightful owner. Rightful owner? Nicholas gripped my wrist, his hold so tight I couldn't break free. Furious, I shouted, Nicholas, what are you doing? Besides hating me, did you ever miss me? Nicholas persisted. I glared at him, my composure crumbling in the face of his questioning. I raised my hand and slapped him across the face. Nicholas, you liar. I'm sorry, Nicholas said, his Adam's apple bobbing as he looked up at me, his eyes filled with sadness. Back then, I didn't have the means to stay by your side. I didn't want you to compromise your studies because of me, so I had to deceive you. Now I have my own company, my own career. I hope you can give me another chance. Although I had guessed the reason for his departure over the years, hearing it now still made me furious. If you never achieved success in your career, were you planning to leave me hanging forever? I demanded. Nicholas froze, remaining silent. Nicholas, after 2 years, what makes you think I still have feelings for you? Late that night, I curled up in bed, crying silently with my eyes closed, feeling as though I had just woken from a dream. Wendy, Nicholas said softly, reaching out to fasten the pendant back around my neck. Early the next morning. After finishing my morning routine, I gazed at the empty living room, rubbing my temples. As I turned around, I unexpectedly saw Nicholas in his white shirt. The imprint of my hand was still visible on Nicholas's face, a testament to how hard I had slapped him yesterday. Shall we have breakfast together? Nicholas's eyes were fixed intently on me. I frowned, not wanting to speak to him. I planned to walk to the station and buy something to eat on the way, but he kept following me. I practically ran all the way to the school gates. Bronte was standing at the entrance, sipping milk. She smiled at me. Why are you running so fast? Is someone following? Oh, bloody hell. Bronte's eyes lit up as she nudged me. I pulled her along, heading into the school without looking back. He's back, she exclaimed. He can do whatever he wants. It's none of my business, I retorted. Picking me up after school, dropping me off in the morning. In just a few days, it felt like we had returned to how things used to be, yet Nicholas and I had become the most familiar of strangers. In the evening, I stood at the school gates, instinctively looking around. As I watched couples walk by, I still didn't see Nicholas. Had he left? Wendy. Nicholas approached, wearing a blue and white tracksuit that made him look surprisingly youthful. He was carrying coffee. If I didn't know he was 30, I might have mistaken him for a junior student. The coffee shop was crowded, so I had to queue for a while. That's why I'm late, Nicholas explained, holding out the coffee to me. Cappuccino. Would you like some? I looked up at his sweat-covered forehead but still accepted the coffee. Feeling that it was warm, I couldn't help but get annoyed. It's so hot today, why did you buy it warm? Your period is coming soon. You should avoid cold drinks. I was surprised that he remembered. I looked at him and asked, are you trying to win me over? Nicholas didn't answer directly. I'll always be good to you. I scoffed, feeling anger rise within me. I said coldly, you once said you'd be with me forever. I'm sorry. Nicholas paused, then leaned down to look me in the eye, speaking slowly and deliberately. I'm here now to fulfill that promise. The current Nicholas was so straightforward, every word unmasked. It reminded me of how I used to be. On the weekend, Grandpa Barnaby specifically notified me not to visit him at the main house. I knew he must have found out about Nicholas's return. When I arrived, Nicholas was already in the living room. Grandpa's face was ashen as he picked up an ashtray and hurled it. Who gave you permission to come back? He shouted. Nicholas maintained his composure, looking at Grandpa and saying calmly, I've grown up now, so I came back. Grandpa was stunned for a moment. Are you threatening me? I wouldn't dare, Nicholas replied. Grandpa's face darkened as he said in a low voice, you seem to dare quite a lot. You've actually set your sights on Wendy. I should have dealt with you back then. Just as he finished speaking, the housekeeper announced, Miss Faraday. I was startled, noticing Grandpa looking my way. I couldn't help but glance sideways at the housekeeper. Surprise flashed in Grandpa's eyes before he smiled and said, Ah, Wendy, come here. Look who's back. Say hello to your uncle. Nicholas's brow furrowed as he looked at me intently. Uncle, I obediently said. A vein visibly throbbed on Nicholas's forehead, his eyes instantly darkening with anger. Grandpa insisted I move back to the main house, but I didn't give a clear answer. I just said I was tired and took the opportunity to tell the housekeeper she didn't need to come to my place every day, but to take care of Grandpa instead. Then I left the main house. When I got home, the night was quiet. Nicholas was leaning against the doorway, a cigarette between his fingers, just like that time by the river. "Stop right there," he said. "Is there something you need, Uncle?" I stopped and asked with a smile, looking at him. Nicholas walked straight towards me, looking down at me. "Say that again." "What did you call me?" "Uncle, of course," I said, looking up at him with raised eyebrows. "I used to call you by your name, but didn't you say that was disrespectful?" "That was before." Nicholas's voice deepened, his eyes filled with irritation. How ridiculous. He hadn't been this angry when I was cold to him a few days ago, but now he's fuming just because I called him uncle. "Don't you like hearing it?" I said with a smirk, my voice cold. "Well, then I'll keep saying it. Uncle, uncle." Before I could react, Nicholas had me pinned against the wall. I could barely breathe and angrily pounded on his chest. "You bastard." I mumbled. He pressed his leg against mine, completely trapping me by the door. I weakly pushed against his chest. "Are you going to keep calling me that?" Nicholas's breath was hot. "Wendy Faraday, don't push me." I laughed coldly, poking Nicholas's chest and grabbing his tie tightly. "What, are you going to have your way with me?" At that moment, Nicholas's expression was complex. He released his hold and only said, "You'll have your time to cry." I shoved him away and sat on the sofa, annoyed. The warmth on my lips still lingered. Nicholas went to the guest room, forgetting to close the door, and headed straight for the bathroom. Soon after, the sound of running water came from the bathroom. As if remembering something, I couldn't help but lean back on the sofa and laugh. I deliberately walked to the bathroom door and knocked. "Uncle, aren't you taking an awfully long shower?" "Wendy Faraday." Nicholas's voice was hoarse but forceful. "Are you asking for trouble?" I could barely contain my laughter, replying teasingly, "I can't hear you." The next second, the bathroom door suddenly opened. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt inexplicably guilty. I instinctively stepped back, and when I looked at Nicholas, I was stunned. He resembled a small dog drenched in rain, staring at me with resentment as if he was about to devour me the next moment. "Wendy Faraday, are you asking to be taught a lesson?" I slowly retreated, laughing awkwardly. I'm tired." With that, I ran away quickly, locked the door behind me, and my little heart was pounding wildly. The next morning, he looked quite unwell, reminding me of how he used to react when I forcibly kissed him in the past, unable to resist. Sitting at the dining table, watching him eat with his head down, I smiled and said, "Are you angry?" Nicholas's hand holding the toast paused briefly as he looked up at me. "You were the one who wanted to kiss, don't blame me." I admit, seeing Nicholas angry made me really happy. Nicholas looked at me, as if trying to smile. "Happy now?" "Just a bit." I was elated inside but didn't want to show it. I lowered my head to eat breakfast, but when I looked up, I met Nicholas's loving gaze. Since it was the weekend, I planned to stay home and read more. Unexpectedly, Nicholas stayed in the study all day. The door was open, and every time I passed by, his phone calls and video conferences seemed to never end. I knew that his quick return to find me and his declaration to grandfather that he had grown up must have cost him a lot, but I had never concretely seen him so busy. As Christmas approached, Nicholas was busy with work and returned to the company. His messages were almost constant, but the more I saw them, the less I wanted to reply. As usual, I bought some things to stock up at home, thinking of cooking when Nicholas returned. However, I didn't expect to see Crispin Harrington sitting on the sofa chatting with grandfather as soon as I entered the door. Next to him was a woman dressed like a wealthy lady, probably Crispin's mother. "Hello, Mrs. Harrington." I looked at them and smiled faintly. "Crispin, long time no see." Crispin had an expression as if he had misheard, probably not expecting me to be so gentle and obedient. "Hello." Mrs. Harrington looked at me, examining me carefully, with a hint of satisfaction in her eyes. "I've always heard Crispin talk about you." Now that I've met you, you're indeed a well-behaved child. I smiled slightly, vaguely guessing that today was an implicit matchmaking session. Grandfather, I'll go upstairs to change clothes first. Grandfather nodded slightly. I put the things I bought in the kitchen, glancing at the housekeeper nearby, indicating her to follow me upstairs to change clothes. Mrs. Harrington will probably stay for dinner tonight. Would you like to look at the menu and instruct the kitchen on what to prepare? Or, would you like to cook yourself? The housekeeper inquired tentatively. I glanced at the housekeeper, raising an eyebrow. Did grandfather tell you to say this? If I'm not mistaken, I'm the one paying your salary. You should know who to listen to, understand? The housekeeper laughed awkwardly and said in a low voice, I'm sorry, Mississippi. I was being presumptuous. I stared at her, then turned to look at my cold expression in the mirror. In a flash, I remembered Nicholas once mentioning that Mrs. Harrington liked spicy food. The memory suddenly came back, and I hadn't expected that at that time. Nicholas was already teaching me how to please Mrs. Harrington, as if anticipating this day. For tonight's dishes, don't add any chili. The housekeeper looked at me, puzzled. I smiled and said, the weather is already hot. Eating spicy food will easily cause acne. Housekeeper, Miss is so thoughtful. As expected, Mrs. Harrington didn't enjoy the meal much and barely touched the dishes. In the dead of night, Nicholas called. I stared silently at the number flashing on my screen, not answering. Nicholas kept calling, one after another. Nicholas, are you asleep? Nicholas, I'm coming back next week. Nicholas, good night. Grandfather, seemingly unwilling to give up, inquired about Mrs. Harrington's preferences and invited her again. I entertained them in the same manner as before. Are you doing this on purpose? Grandfather furrowed his brow as he looked at me. I glanced up briefly, then lowered my eyes back to the magazine I was flipping through, saying nothing. Don't be rude. Whoever invited them can entertain them. I tossed the magazine aside and looked at Grandfather. Grandfather, if you like the Harringtons so much, take them to the main house. This is my home, and they're not welcome here. Grandfather was momentarily speechless with anger. Your temper is getting more and more peculiar. You used to be so cheerful. How will you ever get married behaving like this? Grandfather, you're overthinking things. I gazed at Grandfather calmly, my voice cool. As a member of the Faraday family, how could I possibly get married? I smiled. People without blood ties will eventually have their own agendas. To protect the Faraday family, I should never marry. Wendy Faraday. Grandfather was at a loss for words. He sighed deeply and said in a low voice, what could the Harringtons possibly want from you? They're a great family too, on par with us. So many people would love to marry into their family. Well, whoever wants to marry them can go ahead. I won't. Grandfather looked at me and scolded, are you really going to argue with your own grandfather over an outsider? Grandfather, I'm not arguing. I just don't like you making decisions for me without even discussing it. Like when you let Nicholas deceive me, and now arranging for Crispin Harrington to come to my house. I looked up at Grandfather, my voice steady. Grandfather, do you see me as your granddaughter, or just a tool for an arranged marriage? Grandfather leaned on his cane, silently looking at me, momentarily unable to respond. What's so good about Nicholas that you're so obsessed with him? When you and he conspired to deceive me, you should have known how persistent I can be. Grandfather gripped his cane with both hands, silent for a long while. Nicholas is indeed exceptional, but he never shows his emotions. He excels at everything he does, making him hard to read. That's why I can't help but be wary of him. If you were to be with him, it could only be a secret marriage. And if he doesn't sign a prenuptial agreement, I won't agree to you two being together, even if it kills me. I lowered my gaze, my thoughts in turmoil. When Nicholas returned, I was already drunk, but I saw his face clearly. Wendy Faraday, you're being reckless again. Nicholas bent down, somewhat annoyed, and quickly walked over. I looked up at him, tears falling silently. What's wrong? Nicholas frowned, holding me in his arms and stroking my head, trying to reason with me. I'm sorry if I sounded harsh. Don't cry. Alcohol isn't good for you, you shouldn't drink too much. I pressed my lips together, trying to hold back my tears, but I couldn't help whispering, "Do you know why I like you?" Nicholas raised his hand and wiped away the tears from the corner of my eye. "Because you were the first person who was kind to me." I looked at him with teary eyes. I gazed at his high-bridged nose, sobbing, my parents' marriage was a sham. From the moment I could remember, no one cared for me. I lived in a mansion but couldn't even get a proper meal. When I went to school, I was hit by a car. I was too young to understand, I only knew that the wound hurt. The driver yelled at me until I cried, but I still rushed to school, only to be late and punished by the teacher to stand in the corner. Nicholas wiped away my tears, comforting me softly, "It won't hurt anymore from now on." My tears seemed unstoppable. I thought things might be a bit different with the Faradays. But grandfather complained about my table manners, and the other relatives, well, they hated me. Before the DNA test results came back, I slept in the small room. You were the one who brought me food every day and bought me clothes. Even though you didn't like to talk much, you bought me those childish stuffed animals. You don't even know how ugly those toys were. From now on, you choose, and I'll buy. Okay? Nicholas lowered his voice. My nose tingled as I looked at him. I like you so much, but you deceived me. Nicholas was momentarily speechless. He held me tightly, stroking my head, and said softly, "It was my fault." "Yes, it was your fault." I raised my hand to pinch his face, angrily asking, "Why did you tell me about Mrs. Harrington's preferences back then?" Nicholas's hand paused slightly. He looked down at me and spoke in an extremely rational tone. According to the Faraday family's customs, there was a high probability that they would arrange for you to be with Crispin Harrington. It would be beneficial for the company's development. The Harringtons, except for Mrs. Harrington, are quite reasonable. Ouch. I bit Nicholas's shoulder hard, determined not to let go until I drew blood. I wasn't sure I could make a comeback. Nicholas endured the pain, holding my waist, and said softly, "Marriage isn't about love, it's about compatibility." I couldn't help but laugh, saying in a low voice, "What if I had already married Crispin Harrington by the time you came back?" Crispin Harrington isn't old enough to get married yet. I would try my best to come back before he reaches that age. I pressed my lips together, annoyed and wanting to strangle him. He had calculated every move, 3 steps ahead. "You bastard." "I am a bastard," Nicholas admitted readily. I really hate how extremely rational he can be. The next day at noon, Nicholas sat nearby, carefully asking, "What would you like for lunch today?" I glanced at him sideways, noticing the mark I'd left on his neck, and said nothing. My earlier intention of cooking for him during our stockpiling was immediately dismissed. Nicholas spoke softly, as if coaxing a child, "Say something." I was about to open my mouth when the doorbell rang. It was Crispin Harrington. "Wendy." "Crispin, don't use my nickname." I leaned against the doorframe, looking at him. "What's up? Something wrong?" Crispin looked at me, scratched his head, and said with a smile, "For that group project, we need a model for a photo shoot." "Could you be my model?" "That's not a big deal. I'll make a call and find someone for you." I was about to take out my phone. Crispin inhaled sharply, frustrated. "Do you think I can't afford to hire a model?" "I specifically want you." "I'm busy." Crispin couldn't help but ask, "Can I at least come in for a glass of water?" I raised an eyebrow, looking at Crispin, about to refuse when he said, "Come on, just because we're not dating anymore doesn't mean you can't offer me a drink, does it?" I stepped aside, making way for Crispin. As we entered the living room, Nicholas had already disappeared. I leaned back on the sofa, picking up a glass of juice. "I heard your uncle is back." Crispin looked at me, scanning the living room before adding with a grimace, "Are you really going to be with him? When you're 40, he'll already have 1 foot in the grave." Just as he finished speaking, and before I could respond, Nicholas walked in carrying tea, calmly standing behind Crispin. I frowned slightly, shaking my head at Crispin, whispering, "Stop talking. I have to say it. It's for your own good." Oblivious, Crispin continued confidently. My aunt said that at his age, men are supposed to be at their peak, but no matter how much you tease him, he doesn't react at all. He must be impotent. Nicholas's face had turned ashen. Crispin added, I'm only telling you this because I consider you a friend. Is that so? Nicholas suddenly spoke. Crispin froze instantly, turning around quickly. He stood up, trembling as he stuttered, an uncle. Nicholas's gaze was cold and sharp. Seeing how frightened Crispin was, I stood up and said, Crispin, didn't you have something to do? You should get going. Ah. Oh, right. Crispin quickly responded, glancing at Nicholas with a stiff smile on his face. Goodbye, Mr. Faraday. I caught Nicholas's eye from the corner of my vision. Nicholas turned away, handing me some cut fruit. I have work to do. Carry on. He could work if he wanted to, it wasn't like I had offended him. But unusually, Nicholas not only went to the gym in the afternoon but also went for a morning run. It's so hot, and you're still running? I couldn't help but ask. He lowered his gaze and said softly, if I don't exercise, my body will deteriorate, and then I'll really be old. Looking at Nicholas, I couldn't help but say, Crispin has always been like that, saying whatever comes to mind. If you really take it to heart, won't you just make yourself miserable? You know him so well? Nicholas asked, wiping his face with a towel, seemingly casually. Of course, I said, crossing my arms and looking at Nicholas. Me, him, and Bronte, we're like a trio. So you often hang out together? Nicholas asked again. I found it odd that he had so many questions today. I glanced at him. Yeah, our schools aren't far apart, and we live close by, so when we're free we. As I was speaking, I felt something was off. Seeing Nicholas's cold expression, I couldn't help but ask, what's wrong with you? Nothing. It's good that you young people have a lot to talk about when you're together. To be honest, I used to often annoy Nicholas, and I could tell when he was angry. But now, I didn't understand what was wrong with him. He still picked me up and dropped me off at school every day, but he became increasingly silent and more fond of running. One day, as he went for a run, I followed him out. Suddenly, I saw a slender woman block his path and even embrace Nicholas. Nick, she exclaimed. Let go. Nicholas raised his hand and pushed the woman away, continuing his run. But the woman, without a word, followed him, jogging alongside. I was furious and sprinted after them. From a few meters away, I heard Nicholas say, Eliza, what's in the past is over. Please don't bring it up again. My mind went blank, and I stopped in my tracks. Glancing at Eliza's figure and her beautiful face, I suddenly felt an enormous sense of inadequacy. Nick, are you really going to be so heartless? You've been single all these years, isn't it because of me? We've already lost so much time. It's not for you, Nicholas interrupted sternly. Eliza looked up at Nicholas with tears in her eyes. Who else could it be for? I'm the only one you've ever dated. Nick, I know you. You're just in denial. Back then, I was blinded by money. I was wrong. I can wait for you, It's for Wendy Faraday, Nicholas blurted out unexpectedly. Eliza was stunned, and so was I. He's been single for me? You're into incest? Eliza finally managed to say after a long pause. Nicholas's expression immediately darkened. We're not blood-related. No wonder you've been avoiding me, Eliza said, staring at Nicholas for a moment before laughing. So you've moved up in the world? Think what you like. Just please don't bother me again, Nicholas said, turning to leave. Eliza trembled with anger and shouted after him, Nicholas Faraday. You're deceiving a young girl for money. Have you no shame? Nicholas ignored her completely. Eliza grew even angrier. You're so much older than her. How could you take advantage of a young girl? Have you no conscience? Nicholas stopped and turned back to look at Eliza with cold eyes. Instead of arguing, he said slowly and deliberately, If you know I have no conscience, then don't come looking for me. At midnight, I was leaning on the sofa, still waiting for Nicholas to return. I was getting worried but couldn't reach him on his phone, so I had no choice but to wait patiently. Gradually, I started to feel drowsy. Cool fingertips touched my cheek. I woke up from the cold but didn't dare open my eyes. Instead, I let Nicholas pick me up. Wendy, Nicholas kissed my forehead. I could smell the mixture of alcohol and shower gel on him. Unable to hold back, I looked up at him and said, "I saw you running today and followed you out. I heard you talking. You've been single all these years because of me? Pretending to be asleep?" Nicholas was stunned for a moment, avoiding the question. I tugged at his collar, feeling upset. How could it be because of me? Was it grandfather's request? But wasn't grandfather eager for you to get married before? Do you want to know the reason? I looked at him timidly, about to answer when he grabbed my hand and kissed me, parting my lips and deepening the kiss. Nicholas. Wendy Faraday, will you marry me? Nicholas pressed his forehead against mine and said in a low voice, I can give you everything. We can sign a contract, black and white. I will be absolutely faithful to you. The proposal came so suddenly. For some reason, Nicholas seemed to be crying, his voice choked with emotion. I know I'm not a good person, but I will never be a bad person in front of you. Nicholas. I had never seen Nicholas like this before. I felt a bit lost, but also felt closer to his true self. I couldn't help but touch his face and say softly, then you must promise never to lie to me. Never ignore my messages, never disappear, never. Tears fell from Nicholas's eyes as he obediently replied, all right, I promise everything. I smiled with satisfaction. Nicholas slowly leaned closer to me. My heart was racing, and I felt shy, clutching his collar tightly. After that night, I cursed Crispin Harrington in my mind. That guy really doesn't have a single honest word in him. For the first time in my life, I experienced what it felt like to have my back broken. Get off! I hissed quietly in the supermarket as Nicholas's hand rested on my waist, gently massaging. I was a bit annoyed. I'll be more careful next time, he murmured. There won't be a next time. I exclaimed, my face flushed. Remembering my swollen eyes from crying, I didn't give him a pleasant look. Nicholas looked troubled as he stood behind me and said softly, let me rub them for you. He kept staring at me, following me wherever I went. It oddly felt like a young married couple going about their day. I never expected that just days after reconciling with Nicholas, we'd end up trending on social media. Nicholas and Wendy Faraday, uncle and niece in incestuous relationship. The glaring red headline and the long string of numbers following it made my heart nearly stop. I didn't dare click on it. The news was quickly suppressed, but it soon resurfaced with edited clips from the hit drama I starred in. The crowd at the school gates was overwhelming. I tried to leave through the back door, but it was blocked too. Suddenly, I found myself trapped in school, unable to get out. I swapped clothes with Bronte, hoping to blend in with the other students, but someone still recognized me. She's here! My hat was suddenly pulled off. Before I could react, I was nearly knocked over by the jostling. A group of bodyguards rushed in, pushing the reporters away. Still dazed, I saw Nicholas walking towards me through the flashing cameras. Don't be afraid, he said. I'm not afraid. I gripped Nicholas's hand, my heart racing. Nicholas put his arm around my waist and quickly led me away from the crowd. We finally made it to the car. He held me close, nuzzling against me affectionately. Give me a hug. What are you doing? I frowned, flustered. How could he think about hugging at a time like this? I heard someone was sobbing uncontrollably in front of my photo on the notice board, he teased. How dare you? Who told you to leave without saying goodbye? I pouted, noticing Nicholas's eyes growing brighter. I pinched his cheek. Don't get cocky, I don't like you that much. He obediently agreed but stole another kiss. Embarrassed, I buried my face in his chest, refusing to let him kiss me again. Once more, the situation escalated. Grandfather collapsed from anger, and the hospital issued a critical condition notice. In the hospital, relatives stood in the corridor with varying expressions. If the old man goes, who gets the money? Who knows what's in his will? The discussions continued. Annoyed, I stood up and looked at them. Is this the time to be talking about wills? Adults are talking, children should stay out of it. Your grandfather doesn't have many days left, and you've made him ill. If you know what's good for you, you'd better get out of the Faraday family. Who are you telling to get out? Nicholas arrived with the medical records. Everyone in the corridor immediately fell silent. They were still as cowardly as before when Nicholas appeared, but their voices were the loudest behind his back. In the hospital room, Grandfather slowly opened his eyes, and upon seeing Nicholas, he immediately shouted, "Scoundrel! Scoundrel! Scoundrel!" "I am a scoundrel," Nicholas admitted. Grandfather pointed at him, trembling. "I've already compromised by agreeing to your secret marriage, and now you go to the press? Are you trying to kill me? Wendy is only 20, do you want her to drown in spit?" Nicholas stroked my head and looked at Grandfather, saying softly, "Grandfather." Hearing Nicholas call him grandfather, his eyes widened. "Get out." I didn't agree to a secret marriage, but I absolutely didn't go to the press. My original plan was to gradually tell everyone that I've left the Faraday family, that I'm no longer part of it, and then announce my marriage to Wendy. Nicholas explained quietly, but Grandfather was no longer willing to listen. Outside the room, Nicholas held my hand, looking at me somewhat anxiously. I didn't contact the press. "Wendy, do you believe me?" I hadn't expected Nicholas to ask this. Looking at him, I said earnestly, "Of course." When I finished looking at all the photos of Nicholas and me together online, my heart sank. Besides the housekeeper, I couldn't think of anyone else who knew our whereabouts. "Mrs. Higgins, why did you do this?" "The Faraday family has treated you well," I said. The housekeeper, with tears in her eyes, trembled as she knelt down. "Miss Wendy, I'm so sorry. They told me Mr. Standish only had a few days left to live. If you left with Nicholas, Mr. Standish would surely not leave you any inheritance. I was afraid all my years of hard work would be for nothing, so I listened to them. Mrs. Higgins, when have I ever mistreated you?" My mind was buzzing. Looking at the housekeeper's sobbing figure, I suddenly felt alarmed. I rushed to the hospital room. However, Nicholas said on the phone, "Grandpa is at our house, not in the hospital." I stopped in my tracks, not having time to process this information before the hospital room door opened. The tall, burly bodyguards Nicholas had brought last time dragged out two people dressed as nurses. It turned out Nicholas had once again thought 3 steps ahead. I had to admit, no wonder the relatives were wary of Nicholas. This guy was overly cautious and clever. From the moment he came back to find me, he had hired a PR team for news alerts to prevent unfavorable news from spreading. That's why the incest rumors were quickly suppressed at the beginning. From the moment Eliza approached him, he sensed something was off. So, he had seen through everything early on but kept quiet, just waiting to gather evidence. How about that? I'm still the clever one, aren't I? Nicholas hugged me, like a child asking for sweets, with a hint of pride. Grandpa, hooked up 2 and 4, spat and said, "At your age, behaving like this." Nicholas's mouth twitched as he glanced at Grandpa, then continued to hold me. "Embracing my woman is perfectly natural." Grandpa's eyes widened. I pinched Nicholas's face, signaling him to tone it down. "Girls grow up so fast," Grandpa sighed. My ears turned red as I poked Nicholas in annoyance. Nicholas had a clingy quality when dating, and that night he demanded his reward. "Nicholas!" I pushed against him with my hands, but he caught them and kissed me again and again, being quite the rascal. "Just one more kiss." Looking into his deep, dark eyes, I whispered, "You said just one. One doesn't seem quite enough." I really wanted to kick him, but I had no strength left and could only let him have his way. I suppose it was a blessing in disguise. Grandpa was furious, but some hidden health issues were also discovered and treated all at once. As for Nicholas and me, our relationship was clearly no longer a secret. The PR team didn't disappoint Nicholas's investment, quickly clearing the negative news online. Legally, the two have no relation at present. In the future, if any, it will be a marital relationship. It turned out Grandpa had long noticed Nicholas's intelligence and, to guard against him, never completed the adoption paperwork. Legally, Nicholas wasn't considered part of the Faraday family. In the hospital room, Grandpa sipped his tea, flipping through the prenuptial agreement, and glanced coldly at Nicholas. "At least you've shown some sincerity, lad." "Thank you for the compliment, Grandpa," Nicholas responded calmly. Grandpa nearly choked on his tea. After calling him Dad for so many years, suddenly changing to Grandpa irritated him even more. "You little rascal, taking advantage and still being cheeky?" "I wouldn't dare," Nicholas said with a faint smile. I stood at the doorway watching, smiling helplessly, then turned to the housekeeper beside me and said softly, "Please take good care of Grandpa from now on. Miss Wendy." The housekeeper trembled slightly, tears in her eyes, and said in a low voice, "Thank you, Miss Wendy. What happened before was my fault. You're not holding it against me, Mrs. Higgins, if you do your best to care for Grandpa from now on, that will be the best way to thank me." The housekeeper agreed profusely and looked at me, saying softly, "I hope Miss Wendy and Mr. Faraday will grow old together." I looked at Nicholas peeling an apple for Grandpa in the hospital room and smiled. "We will." On a midsummer evening, Nicholas invited me out for a barbecue. I arrived on time, but he was late. I could only squat on the side, watching others set up heart-shaped rose arrangements. Not long after, Zeb's family arrived with Bronte, but Nicholas still hadn't shown up. "Bronte, didn't Nicholas come with you?" I asked softly. Bronte laughed and looked at me. "It's only been a short while since you last saw him, and you're already missing him?" "Not at all." I blushed, feeling increasingly prone to acting coy. "Hey, where are you?" I frowned, just thinking about how to be coy with him when I heard a child's cheer on the other end of the phone. I turned around instinctively. Zeb's child, holding a bouquet of roses, ran quickly to me, handed them over, and ran off. In my view, a certain someone dressed particularly formally walked towards me step by step, knelt on one knee in front of me, and opened a ring box. "Wendy." Nicholas looked up at me, holding the ring, his face flushed red. Unlike last time when he was drunk, this time he looked particularly nervous. I was secretly delighted and directly put on the ring without hesitation. "I do. Marry me." I haven't finished," Nicholas looked at me in surprise. I leaned down and kissed him, raising an eyebrow. "Whatever you haven't said, save it for your children to hear." Nicholas looked completely bewildered and at a loss. The next moment, Bronte shouted, "Hey, look at the camera." I immediately cooperated by pulling Nicholas up, holding the roses, and smiling sweetly at the camera, yet I couldn't help but look at him. At this moment, the summer breeze, along with his burning gaze, blew towards me.